Welcome to the Intelligence Amplifiers, podcast that celebrates the people who make the intelligence a collective superpower. In every episode, we uncover the stories of learning and development leaders who amplify knowledge, break down silos, and empower teams to thrive. These are the enablers of insight, the ones turning expertise into action and shaping the future of work by ensuring that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. So, if you're ready to explore how the intelligence is amplified and shared across organizations, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome. Well, today we have Blake Payton on the show. Blake is currently at Dialpad running the global L&D. And welcome, Blake.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Marko. It's good to be here.
Yeah. And what I found interesting about your story is your early roots in the academia, right? Like the corporate training wasn't something you set out to do. Can you walk us maybe back down the memory lane of like what were you thinking back then? Yeah.
So initially, I wanted to be a professor, and I still might one day. Who knows, right? But I realized I'd spent so long in academia, I kind of wanted to live a little bit and maybe even have the funding to facilitate said living, right? So maybe more of a retirement gig. But after I earned my master's especially, I began to slowly realize that maybe higher education was not the place for me. I found myself, especially coming from an anthropology background and then having master's in education, I realized that this isn't really a culture that I value or want to be part of. Now, granted, I can't speak for all institutions everywhere, but it seemed like the pervading culture in higher education was just not for me. And the trend that I began noticing was that everyone is very overqualified for their job, and they're very underpaid. And I had what we would call in the South a very come to Jesus moment, right? And I thought, do I really want to do this forever? Is this what I want my career to look like? No was the short answer. So I had a bit of a midlife crisis about it. And I knew some folks out in Atlanta. I'm outside Atlanta for reference, and they worked in the city for tech startups. Surprise, surprise, right? And one of my friends told me that there was this really exciting company that they had just joined, and as a matter of fact, one of their enablement directors, I believe, or the director of enablement, was spinning up sort of an ad hoc learning and development thing, and said that he was looking for people with an educator bent. I was like, why the hell would they want, or is this casual over a drink? And no, you should apply. I was like, they won't want to have anything to do with me. I'm in education. No, that's exactly what he's looking for. So, well, I ended up talking to him, suffice to say, and they offered me the job over several other candidates that I thought from, the rumor mill would have been much more of a shoe-in. But we had I would say he was a bit of a left-handed thinker, and he thought and believed that someone from an education background, an anthropology background, could do more with this program than someone that was what he called typically corporate, if I'm recalling correctly. And so, to my surprise, I wound up with the role. And I will say, I think he was right. And I don't mean to ring my own bell, but what I do mean to say is that in this space, in this job, I've had more autonomy. I've had more freedom to create the lessons that I actually feel are valuable for other living, breathing humans in their learning journeys, without having to stick to academic dogma, right? A stricture or a prescribed pedagogy that says this is how you should do it, and there's no room for what corporate loves to call outside the box thinking. I hate to throw around buzzwords, but it really does allow for that. And so far, this space, this job, it's been the best one that I've ever had in my entire career. So, yeah.
And I'm going back to you didn't enjoy the culture of the academia. You enjoyed the learning, it sounds like, but you didn't enjoy the culture. And then you were surprised by the culture you found in corporate, namely at Dialpad. And you mentioned some of those qualities of that culture difference, right? Like one is autonomy, right? Like, well, what else was there that surprised you in a positive way?
Yeah.
This is the culture I actually thrive in.
Yeah. So I remember vividly my first week or so after we went through the scoping of an onboarding program, like a pre-onboarding program for the first onboarding class, right? I was a part of that. And I remember after that, I remember getting to day 4, day 5, and being like, okay, so what the hell am I supposed to do now? No one's telling me, right, to do anything. No one's given me a mandate or a directive. And I'm just, do I just show up? Like, do I need to ask somebody? From the environment that I come from, it's very clear what you should be doing. And if you're not doing it, you're in trouble, right? It's a very, I don't know, old school 70s business office kind of way of doing things. That's what the culture feels like. Very task oriented, chained to your desk. Why are you not in your office? Did I see you walking across campus? You know you're not allowed to do it, right? And it's very. I hesitate to. Well, I can't quite find the word, but when I joined this job, it was just like, yeah, do what you want. What have you come up with? And that was just mind blowing for me because I never had that freedom. I kind of didn't know what to do at first. Like, what the hell am I supposed to be doing with my time? The idea was, after I had a conversation with my manager about it, because I told him, hey, this transition's a little rough for me. I have no idea what the hell I should be doing. He said, Blake, the beauty about jobs like this is they are what you make them. You can make this job essentially whatever you want it to be. And I realized that you're not used to that kind of freedom. And thank him for that. Oh my. But he was right. He said, outside of this, and this piece, right, you get to scope your role out. And he said a lot of jobs in corporate are that way, especially as they're first spun up. You're one of the ones that will define what this role looks like for the future people that occupy it when you've moved on, And I think at the time I had no idea really what that meant, but now I do, and I'm happy to have it. We are not glorified lever pullers here. And I tell all my new hires this as they come aboard, right? Ostensibly, everyone is hired because they are the best per our valuation of their talents, right? What they bring to the table. They're the best at what they do, right? Which is not lever pulling. Anybody given enough time, given enough training can pull a lever. Does not matter what your qualifications are, right? What extra do you bring to the table? What is that creative bit where you do the scoping out of your own role? What does that look like? That, I believe, is the thing that differentiates people with a creative mindset, the kind of people that work in the tech industry, the kind of people that are excited, the people that work at startups versus people that have been taught to stay chained to that desk and listen to their manager for every move that they should make. And I suppose that's the best way I know how to explain the delineation I'm trying to drive at here. In a way, it's almost like you've gone to work your whole life and you never once realized that it felt like prison until someone let you out, right? And when I joined Dialpad, I felt like I had been let out of prison, given autonomy over my own career, was able to finally have fun at work and enjoy what I do. That's a foreign concept for me, right? I've never experienced that before. I've only worked in government and higher education. And I'd never experienced that culture. We used to hear about the beanbags and the beer bars at Google and think, wow, if only, right? And this is a very life-changing moment for me to be able to be a part of a culture where you can drive your own career, you can own your own success, and you can be the CEO of your own career, and you can make the decisions that you believe in, as opposed to the ones, say, your manager tells you should be believing in. Makes all the difference.
Yeah. I kind of remember my parents' generation, which was almost like not quite time card punching, but getting very close to that. So not having that autonomy over their work. And as you were kind of sharing your experience, what came to mind is Daniel Pink in his whole book on motivation, what the drive, right? Like what makes us motivated. And it's not this external things like money and titles, but it's very much internal. And he basically unpacks it into three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? And so you talked a lot about how this newfound autonomy was something that was, really kind of welcome and interesting and challenging initially, right? You obviously had a mastery coming from the educational background, so you had obviously the skills. I'm wondering about this like sense of purpose. It seems like that's something that you also discovered, and once you were sort of like, well, do whatever the hell you want. So it's kind of like it's a little bit of a challenging confrontation, right? Like, great, I have this freedom and I know how to do the job. What do I want to create? Right. And so I'm curious, how did you tap into that, like more like inner sort of like, this is my purpose, this is why I'm here?
Okay, that's a phenomenal question, Marko. Holy hell! So I'll tell you straight up. I want to start with Let me just say this: the best mentor I've ever had in my life. When I was in education, I was in my master's degree. I went and shadowed him at school. I believe he moved out to California. Is now a professor, last I heard. But he was actually my fifth grade social studies teacher. He had just started teaching. Changed lives, this man. Well, when I was in my master's, I believe he was principal over in the metro Atlanta area. And I rang him up and asked if I could come shadow him for, a portion of my master's that I had to do, and just see what a day looks like for him as an administrator, because a lot of my educator stuff has an administrative bent to it, right? Program management, school management, like learning management. And so I went and did that. And in the big conversation that we had, the interview that I did with him, he told me one thing that just rings in my mind day in and day out. And it's basically to be an evoker of knowledge, right? To be an evoker of knowledge, not a banker of knowledge, right? And the idea was that you're trying to give them this much, and the idea is not to just dump information into the brain and then after you've done your dumping, expect them to regurgitate it 3 days later, right? You're supposed to, a good educator will lead them only so far and let them make up that last little gap so they feel like it's theirs, right? It's not someone else's that's been sort of poured into their brain, so to speak. And that, as far as personal mission goes, stuck with me. And I thought, well, how can I accomplish that, right? I started coupling that with all the anthropological thinking that I've been doing, because in my heart of hearts, I think I'm more anthropologist than educator, right? Just something to do with humans in general, I suppose. And so I thought, well, what is it that I see trend-wise as far as culture goes, as far as happiness goes, as far as learning outcomes go? And corporate culture is pretty miserable on the whole. Mm-hmm. What if your workplace could be a place that you go, right? And it's not something that you feel as though you have to do, but it's something that you're happy to do. You actually enjoy doing it. You're not faking it. It's not bullshit. You're not peddling bullshit. It's not false optimism, which is terribly unhealthy. You genuinely enjoy what you do. The barriers for enjoyment are a positive, caring culture where people feel like they are a part, they belong, right? We're leaning into the anthropology of it all here. Mm-hmm. And they're not having to sit through tedium, right? It's something that is engaging. Now, this is where that evoking comes in, right? Because if you are an evoker of knowledge, really, it's how do I say that? Sort of like a mutual learning environment, right? Where you're ping-ponging ideas off of each other and you're building the conversation together with your students, as opposed to, and you're giving them autonomy in the learning process, as opposed to just banking like most people do when they're just clicking through and reading off slides and this is what you should know about this company. People are going to be dead by the time they get out of there, right? They're going to be asleep or something like it. They're not getting anything out of this, right? he also told me something else. He said, education is part learning and part showmanship. And that holds true as well. Honestly, Marko, I forgot the original question. I have a tendency to ramble, so you're going to have to watch me here.
No, it's awesome. And I was going to actually ask you, like, it's always interesting when you have some other skill and then you take the page out of another industry's playbook and bring it into what you do today. And we've seen cases of that with like somebody coming from like a design thinking and bringing that to L&D, or some other aspect. I came from like more engineering aspect and bringing that into learning and development. But you came from anthropology, and I think you kind of touched on that, how you leaned on that skill set to kind of create a cross-pollinate it with learning and development and make corporate learning fun. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And so I think you mentioned how normal learning was boring and how
It is.
kind of bring. So what else are some of the lessons from anthropology, from that other part of your life, that you kind of brought into your corporate environment?
Comunitas, right? Is this concept that we float around a lot. I'm not going to get deep into the academia, but those of you who might already know will know. But it's a sense of community, and it really is basic. Like it's stupid simple, right? It addresses basic human needs, and it really is a need for a sense of community and belonging. And when you can achieve that, the rest falls into place. I tell my new hires all the time, the work follows the relationship. It is never, ever, ever the other way around. And with corporate culture, it's difficult to get people to buy into that. It really is, because everybody wants to be the best, and everybody's very cordial on the surface, but at some level, it seems as though everybody's trying to gently outshine the other one. And it's this very passive aggressive sort of mentality. And granted, this is not everywhere, but general trend. Now, there's a reason why memes are made about this, right? Because everyone has had a similar experience at some point somewhere. And that pervading culture is nasty. But when you can get a healthy, positive, caring culture, a nurturing culture where people genuinely care, you're going to get buy-in. You're going to get engagement. You're going to get all these wonderful things that actually drive that business success that your CEO is looking for when he's talking about productivity and engagement at the monthly all hands. That's how you get it. It's not doubling down on whatever and crunching the numbers and metrics. Sure, that's a great measurement tool, but that's all it is. You're not going to maximize on a spreadsheet. The way that you maximize productivity is through human happiness. And I will die on that hill, because happy humans do their best work. And when they can go into a workplace and they've built that strong relationship with that person and they're having a shit day, they're allowed to have that shit day. And they also have a friend there. Now, this is still in the workplace now, that will care for them, and they'll be uplifted there. When is the last time you ever felt cared for and uplifted? When you were having a bad day at work, as opposed to feeling as though you have to mask and hide it so that you don't seem unprofessional. Yeah. Right? Listen, it's humans that do this work. Humans have positive and negative emotions. We're made up of both. About a coin toss, depending on which one it comes down on, right? We can't just pretend we're all of one thing, right? You have to be able to have an environment where you can bring your whole self to work. And that's how you get happy humans that have fun at work, because they're allowed to be their whole selves. And those kinds of people are the ones that will create these strong relationships, right? They'll be having beers with their ex-team members after they've left to go to other jobs just to catch up, right? The secret sauce is building real, honest human relationships, not cross-functional partners, right? Yeah. I've been accused, I laughed when I was, this is really funny. I've been accused by one of our higher-ups fairly recently that I was famously anti-corporate, ha, 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 ha. And I was like, I kind of like that. I actually do kind of like that. I said, although I might say I'm not necessarily famously anti-corporate, I'm actually famously pro-human. That's how I would phrase it.
I hear a lot of being authentic in that, and like the opposite is wearing the mask, the persona, right? Like that's where we typically have to hide behind the mask, the workplace, and you're demasking and people and like providing a safe place to be authentic selves, the whole selves, right? So you now have the opportunity to kind of instill that. You're on the onboarding at Dialpad, and how did you go about creating that? Like, how do you now bottle those beliefs, and like, what does the rubber meet the road, right? Like, and you mentioned the numbers, and it's a lot of humans that kind of came through the door into your organization, and you had the opportunity to kind of put this in place. So what does that look like?
You know, it's hard to say. I don't know, because here's what I'll say, Marko. With learning, like, onboarding programs, for instance, there's never a place in that program when I'm designing it, when I'm scripting it, where I'm like, this is a real human moment and I'm going to capitalize on that here. I don't do that. All I have on those slides is just the content. And I don't follow them bullet by bullet by bullet and move on. I flesh them out, and then something pops up and we talk about it. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe it's less designing the content to have those moments and more about not focusing too heavily on the content if we don't cover all of it, right? And getting out of our own way to let those moments happen. That's when the magic happens. There's no purposeful way, I think, to build rapport other than to just be kind and welcoming. There's not really a magic trick to it other than just being authentic with people. That's the best thing I know to really say here. Because all that's really on those pages are just, maybe there's an anecdote here and there, but the real magic happens when people start talking and they start getting comfortable with each other. And, if I had to say one thing that would promote it, it would probably be group activities, right? If that, I don't know, it's really hard to put my finger on it. People have asked me this before. I was in a blog once. We had our onboarding program had recently become an industry leader, whatever the hell that means, and they wanted to ask us about it. And I told them as much the same thing. I don't really have a good answer. The content is sound. It's scientifically sound. It's been well researched. There's just a lot of care we exude in what we do. And I don't think you could ever call bullshit on it because it is real and genuine. And I tell everybody, like, the moment I can't mean what I say anymore is the moment I need to leave. Yeah. Because if I'm having to lie to myself and then lie to you, these results are going to change. And it's so hard to measure human sentiment. You can't do it, right? I believe Neil deGrasse Tyson said that's why social science is hard, because you can measure rocket output or force or whatever he was talking about, but you can't measure the human heart. You can't measure human sentiment. I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Yeah, we this comes up. So we've been doing TechnoCon as a in like a community roundtable, and so this question of measurement comes up a lot, right? Because the learning and development, we have such a conviction about our programs really making a difference. You see it because you are working with the new hires. So you can kind of like, you have a pulse on this. You have this feedback loop. But how the question that always comes up is like, how do you sell this up, right? The leadership, they don't want the stories, they want the data. They see your excitement, they want the data, right? And so how do we measure this? And the different ways to kind of do that. And we always keep talking about that. But I remember when you and I talked about it, you mentioned NPS and you mentioned score, and it kind of blew me away. Like, even just as imperfect as a measurement it is, it's still the numbers were significant and comparable to some of the biggest companies in the world. So do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the sentiment that you're getting from your
audience? Yeah. It is overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelming. And thank you very much. I enjoy talking about this because I don't get to do it often. But yeah, there was a seminal moment for me, because numbers are just numbers. And that, to your first part of the question, that's exactly what the executives want. They don't want the narrative, which is where the power really lives. Okay.
Exactly.
But again, human science. So of course that's what I'm going to say, right? But they want the executive summary, the one pager, and they want the numbers. Damn it! And so that's what you give them. That's the whole reason why that score is there, because any anthropologist worth their salt will tell you can't measure human sentiment out of a score of 0 to 100. You can't do it. It's impossible. But you do have to give layman's, right, some sort of representation that they can understand. You got to meet them where they're at and give them something that will give them some kind of idea about how successful this is or is not, right? Because there's no way in hell people are going to read the narrative feedback, even though it's there. I mean, the best they might do is compile it all and do an AI summary, which does not capture the spirit of it, in my humble opinion. But we were a really seminal moment for me compared to Microsoft and compared to Apple, because we were onboarding people that had come from those companies. I was onboarding in the program that I built. And a lot of the time, people will really appreciate my what I like to call no bullshit, anti-corporate, pro-human approach, or whatever word you want to insert there. And they'll reach out on the side after everything's done and they'll say, thank you. And I really enjoyed this, or I really enjoyed that. And hey, do you want to get a beer? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's get to know each other. I don't like meeting new coworkers. I like meeting new friends, straight up. From Microsoft, the dude told me this, I came from Microsoft and this absolutely blows them out of the water. I was floored. Especially coming from what I consider to be kind of a dark hole in the universe prior to my current company. I was just like, he must be just being real nice. Well, then it happened again with someone from Apple, and I thought, okay, maybe this is real. And I got up, I walked to the living room, went to the shower and cried about it. You know, it was so moving to hear that, especially when you spent your whole career not really feeling as though you're really making a difference with people, and you put your whole heart into it and you attempt it with everything you got. And then there's proof that you've built something worth sharing, right? Not worth keeping all to yourself, but something that people get real, meaningful value out of, where people can find real connection in a workplace. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I'd tell you that is the last place you're ever going to find any kind of real anything, much less connection. But lo and behold, there we were. And I couldn't believe it. And the words like industry leading and world class, I don't know what the hell that means. I still struggle with what the hell they mean today. And NPS scores are, it's great to go look at, 96, 97%. Especially when you have that many, but like in the grand scheme of things, what does it really mean? Like, what is the context for that? But being compared to companies I know, like Apple University, for God's sake, I mean, that's a big deal. But yeah, to have a human, an actual human that didn't have to say any of that, reach out and say that, I felt like I finally made it. I'm on the right track. I mean, if anybody's an industry standard for a benchmark, right, it should be a company that has their own university and so you're getting those good results. And then you feel appreciated. You feel valued. You feel like your work is not only valued by the people that are going through your programs, but by the people that manage you as well. And for the first time in my career, my life even, everything seemed to be in the right place. And I felt very fortunate. I suppose that's a bit more narrative than you asked for, but there you have it.
I mean, NPS in the 90s with 2/3 of people report it. I mean, those things are significant. Like even like I said, there's no perfect metric, but when you have something that is so blowing it out of the water, I think it's worth mentioning. So that's why I wanted to kind of touch on that.
Oh, thank you.
And you said how well you made it, and I'm always like, I go back to like, well, what was behind your success? Like what can others learn from your story? And you mentioned earlier having a mentor, right? And I go back to my own career as a founder, CEO. I always wanted a mentor. I always I was seeking that. I didn't know how to go about getting. I have a fabulous mentor now, but it took me probably a good decade to get there. And then as L&D professionals, we talk about mentorship and coaching, and we want to provide that to others internally to in our organizations, and we certainly run a number of programs like that at large companies. But I don't see often us, like L&D professionals, having our own mentors. So how did that come about for you? What does it mean for you to have a mentor? What does that look like? I'm curious.
I never seek to do it.
Mm.
I'll tell you that. I think maybe the worst kind of mentor is the one that thinks they are one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you seek to lead, you probably shouldn't be leading. It just, I think it just kind of happens. And in unexpected places, for instance, I had a guy reach out to me not terribly long ago, but it has been quite some time, out of the blue. And he asked me, he's like, hey, what are some tips and tricks for facilitating? You're this and you're that, and you're really good at it, and I'd like to know. Marko, dude, I don't feel qualified to give advice about what a good facilitator should look like. And it's really weird when everybody seems to think that, and you don't. You know, I haven't gone to facilitator training. I haven't done this. I've done it a lot, a lot, but I don't know. And then they'll ask for advice, and you just give it. And I suppose if they continue asking you for advice and you give it because you want to see them be successful, then I suppose that's what makes you a mentor. I think maybe then, if that's the case, then becoming a mentor, being a good mentor, is being recognized as someone who has the knowledge available and will help you, get to where you need to be with said knowledge. But I think it has to be recognized first by others that are seeking what they assume you have or value you for. So yeah,
it's not a title. It's on merits. Yeah. It's what's the term, like leading with power versus influence, right? Like, so one is kind of granted to you, like the title, like I'm a mentor. The other is earned, right? Like through merits. It's like just this relationship, and you turn back and you're like, you know what? Oh, you've been kind of mentoring me, like you doing this.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. Yeah. So you must be fortunate to have people like that in your life, and it sounds like the huge impact on your career. I'm curious, what is next? Like, how are you thinking about? Obviously, you had this like kind of pivotal point from academia to corporate. Stumbled upon, took some lessons from your previous life into this, made it successful. What's on the horizon? Like, how are you looking about the future and what is our job, especially like now, AI comes up a lot, like, and so forth. Like, what is going to be, what does this look like for us or for you specifically in the near future?
As far as my near future is concerned, I hope it's more of a managerial role, program design. I'd like to lean into that. I've been facilitating and presenting for a very long time, and I can tell you, now that I'm in my 40s, after the third day straight of basically screaming positivity at people and teaching them cool shit, I'm very tired. So I suppose I could use a break, and maybe to be able to step back and be a little bit more creative from a program standpoint would be very cool. And to maybe teach somebody else how to step up and present. Maybe somebody who's just a little bit younger with a little more energy that relies way less on coffee. As far as the industry is concerned, AI, I have mixed feelings about it because I think it's an invaluable tool. I think it could be utilized in a way that could be super, super beneficial to us, right? And it essentially, it sort of summarizes all the knowledge, right? And it does that so much faster. So there's so much less poring over resources. But like any tool humankind has ever invented, I'm quite certain it will first be very badly misused so that we can find its limits and then put it in its place where it needs to go. Since Homo habilis, right? When we first started making tools, because humans are reductive learners, We have to find out what something is not good at to be left with what it is good at, right? So I think the same is true here. We're going to overextend with AI. It's going to cause a lot of problems. And then we'll dial it in after we've overdone it, because broadly speaking, big brush stroke, I think that's human nature.
Yep. Got it. And you and I started the whole conversation about AI and LMS and how you think LMS is dead. And so that was like, tell me more. And yeah,
I definitely think it should be,
for
for sure. And sorry, LMS, but yeah, y'all need to go. Yep. It's not effective, and maybe it was once, but I think in the modern landscape, especially with AI on the way in, and then the reverse Flynn effect. I know we talked about that being present, and then Gen Z entering the workforce. They learn very differently than people did in 1980. You know, like even Zennials had a tough time with LMS systems, right? People don't learn that way anymore. They're wildly ineffective. You have to be more engaging. You have to be more interactive. Hey, if you can take your training on your phone, so much the better, because everybody has one of those in their pocket. They don't have to be, again, chained to their desk. They don't have to sit and listen to some boring HR person or AI robot that sounds like, because everybody thinks they're supposed to sound like, boring HR person, talk about boring stuff that you don't really care about, with an utter lack of humanity in everything that they say, right? We are so hungry, especially now post-COVID, for human connection in a way that I don't think we've ever been. We're experiencing now a loneliness epidemic, and I think it's fallout from the isolation that we've experienced, because it's altered human relationships, and we're so thirsty for human connection, and we'll take it anywhere we can get it. We'll take it anywhere we can get it, and I think LMSs are just so disconnected from human to human learning that they're wildly ineffective, even if the content's good, even if the structure's good, even if it's metrically sound. There's no human. It's asynchronous. You're just clicking through and listening to a robot person tell you about boring things, as opposed to someone that could maybe break it down with an analogy, right? Or brighten up your day a little bit, or crack a joke with you before they move on. I can't remember where I heard this. I believe it was in the realm of game design. I really like video games. Okay. Yes. And I was, Baldur's Gate was huge. I love that game, Baldur's Gate 3. And I was watching the Game Awards, maybe something along those lines. Anyway, I heard a quote that said, if you make a game for everyone, you've just made a game for no one. I thought, wow, that's deep for game design. And so I went and took a shower about it, as I do. This is where I do all my best thinking. Is when things occur to me. And I realized that, you know what? I think the same thing goes with learning approaches. LMS systems are kind of for everybody, aren't they? So is the person they choose to deliver the information in the most neutral way possible. Ha ha ha, funny joke. That was actually lame, or whatever, right? It's connecting with no one because it was designed to connect with everyone. Sometimes you do have to tailor your approach a little bit. And what a great way to do that, other than to have a live human in the room that can do that for you. And that, I think, is something that AI will absolutely never be capable of, is achieving that real, genuine human connection that we're also thirsty for.
Yeah. I mean, we, Plus Plus started as a sort of like a peer learning platform. That's what we did at Twitter, where engineers are kind of learning from one another, getting together. And it was very much this live, face-to-face interaction, and this pre-COVID and so forth. And then through COVID, we kind of became more of also an LMS, right? Like added all the LMS features. And I was in a board meeting not too long ago with my VCs, and we started this a while back, but they challenged me, and they're like, hey, the world has changed, right? Like, and what would this product look like if you were building it today? Like, how would you solving this problem if you were solving it today? And it was a very interesting, that was like sort of like, this is worth a long shower, right? Like to think, to think through this. It was so that's what at least that's what I'm kind of envisioning now, and kind of working on that. But yes, that there's something about that in the world of artificial intelligence. There's also collective intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's this is why we call this podcast Intelligence Amplifiers, because we are recognizing that in the world of AI, artificial intelligence, there's also collective intelligence within an organization. And, one of the hypotheses is that the job of learning and development is really to kind of create this collective intelligence so that 1 + 1 is 5. And it's kind of like in nature, you see this with like a swarm of bees or a colony of ants and so on, where an individual is only so smart, but the collective is very, very powerful.
Oh, yes. Especially when that collective is diverse as opposed to subject to groupthink, right?
Exactly.
You have to be very careful because the culture can shift on you very quickly, and then that collective intelligence, that beautiful diversity that serves to, it can turn into groupthink real quick, right?
That's Kevin Kelly wrote the book a long time ago. He's the editor of Wired magazine. He wrote the book. I think it's called.
Oh, wow.
And so he talks about that. He compares swarm intelligence to the herd mentality.
Yeah.
And so one is very intelligent, and the other one is, not very smart, like lemmings. Everyone's just jumping over it. So there's that. Yeah. But this is a very interesting topic, like where we're going with that. So one of the questions I always ask is like, if, like looking back at your own career, now where you're at, like what would be a lesson, what would be a advice you would give to your younger self?
Oh, well, first off, don't drop out of school. That was not a smart move. It's going to set you back 10 years. Don't do it. But, everybody has to pursue a dream. So I suppose it wasn't wasted effort. But again, we are reductive learners, and I had to decide what didn't work. So I was left with what did. I was always good at academics, but I never really wanted to do that. You know what I wanted to do? I'll tell you. I do a lot of thinking on a whiteboard, and I write things down because as you get older, of course, I don't know, maybe you look back a lot more. So I suppose this is a really same question. And I used to know what my dream was, Marko. Do you have a dream? Do you know what it is? Here's the thing. For the first time in a very long time, I realized I've not thought about what my dream is for a while. So I wrote it on my board. What is my dream? That means one of two things. Either I need to get back in touch with myself, or I've achieved everything that I wanted to up until that point. In either case, I think future planning is warranted, don't you? Right? What is my next? Another great mentor of mine always told me to be preparing for my next. That's another piece of advice I would have given my younger self. Don't rest on your laurels. What's next? Now, do take breaks. Right? Remember the 52-17 rule. Remember the Pomodoro methodology, right? But take care of yourself, but also be thinking about, okay, what's next? But also, recognize the value of the present moment. That I would tell myself. Also, have a little more fun, for God's sake. Get out. Say yes to more things. Stop saying no to so many things. Stop being so shrewd. I would say that. Stop playing it safe. Gamble a little bit. Not actual gamble, but, take chances. Say yes. It was a complete and utter gamble and happenstance, and just saying yes to something I knew wouldn't work out that landed me here with you today by way of a whole ass industry change that I wasn't expecting either. And, just saying yes. But imagine what if you said no, where you would still be, pulling the same dumb old lever in the same dumb old place where you're not appreciated and you're underpaid.
Yep.
So saying yes to more things, I think, preparing for your next, that sounds good. And what's your dream? What is your dream? What's your next, right?
Yeah, like dream. Yeah, I love that. Like, I have kids, and I always think, like, if I was on my deathbed, like, if I had to leave them with one word of advice, would be dream, right? And it's easy to say. What I also heard you saying is kind of having that slack in your life, like time, where you can actually give yourself a permission to dream.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's because dreaming is work. It's process. It takes effort. Like you need to kind of you wanna do it. And what I also heard is, you didn't say it, but I heard that fear is a bitch, right? Like, and often that can hold us back and there was a sense of courage. Like there's a courage baked into dreaming, right?
There is.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Especially coming up in poverty, you're taught not to dream, right? And it's not explicitly taught. It's more of a sort of an intrinsic thing that you pick up on because of poverty and what it does to your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Having come up in poverty, it's one of my friends grew up alongside me. I may have mentioned this already in our prior chats, I know, but he and I mean, we've had to go to counseling about just how to stop thinking a certain way, right? I remember the first time I got real, not higher ed money for the very first time, I was still thinking like I had nearly nothing. And my significant other at the time was like, what the hell is wrong with you? We've got plenty. Why are you so, I began to realize that it's here. It's all here. This is where you're poor. Once you're done being poor, you're still poor up here until you address that. So much is true about it's only here with so many things that you encounter, right? And that one's yes, fear is a bitch. And you really do have to do the work to get past it. Whether it's money, whether it's just the courage to dream, the courage to think, I can do this, as opposed to, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to fail, no, and then just never do it. Because fear, more your point, fear will keep you right where you're at until you die. And that's all that fear will do for you. Why not go take a chance? Why not risk it all? At least something will change. At least something will be different. You won't be stuck. At the very least, it won't be monotonous. And sometimes a change is as good as a rest. Even if it's not inherently a positive change, it's still a change and you still probably needed one.
Yeah, I hear the abundance mindset. There's something there. Yeah, you said it quite nicely. Well, thank you. This was super inspiring. You made my Friday amazing. Thank you, Blake. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Marko. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and great to have you on the show.
Right on.
That's it for this episode of the Intelligence Amplifiers. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the future episodes. And if you're interested in being a guest or have a question, check out the episode description for how to reach us. Also, don't forget to check out Plus, the platform that makes collective intelligence at scale possible. Find out more at plusplus.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep amplifying.